I'm Mark Medina with the LA Times Lakers blog, and we're featuring the latest edition of Lakers Roundtable, where the Lakers are in the middle of their more difficult portion of their schedule. They just had a 2-game trip last week against Dallas and Denver, and this week, 2 of their 3 games are against playoff caliber teams, one with the Utah Jazz, another with the Boston Celtics. And as much history and respect the Lakers have for the Jazz, however, Utah is on a 4-game losing streak on its recent East Coast trip. First time they've lost that many consecutive games since late January of 2009. And to dissect what's going on with Utah and to preview the Lakers-Jazz matchup, we bring in the Salt Lake Tribune's Brian T. Smith. Brian, how you doing today?
I'm well. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for coming on here. You mentioned in a recent article that part of Utah's recent struggles point to the 3 E's that you termed in execution, effort, and enforcement. What's the Jazz lacking in those 3 areas?
They're not executing on the offensive or the defensive end. Serious lack of effort at times from both the starting unit and the second unit. And they're not being tough. They're not being mentally tough. They're not being physically tough. When you put all it together, it's a good Jazz team. It's not a great Jazz team, but they've been playing very poor during the last 4 games, and in some ways, off and on for about the past month. When they don't bring it, they are maybe an average team, and then when they don't play well, you get what you did on that 4-game road trip, which was the worst basketball this team's played all season.
Right. You mentioned a lot of just different, theories and conclusions that Jerry Sloan and some of the players have made. You know, when you talk about this disconnect, what are some of the main things that is contributing to the current problems right now?
Well, it traces back to the start of the season. I mean, technically, in some ways, this is a rebuilding year for the Jazz, and it's very easy, especially if you're a Jazz fan, to lose sight of that, because this team is always so consistent. They're often posting 50 wins every season. They're almost always in the playoffs. You know, Jerry Sloan is not associated with losing. However, they had a rough offseason. They lost Carlos Boozer, Wesley Matthews, and Kyle Korver. Korver is technically replaceable. I mean, he's more of a shooter than anything else, and he's not a great defender. However, he was able to stretch the floor. He was able to hit the 3 ball. And Wesley Matthews was a huge loss for this team. It kind of went somewhat unnoticed nationally because of the LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh summer. But Wesley Matthews played a huge part of this team last year, and he's developed into an all-star caliber player for the Blazers. And then you lose Carlos Boozer, who wasn't so much a fan favorite, but numbers-wise was a huge component of this team, and he was the 2 to the 1 that was Deron Williams, and they were able to flip-flop that 1 and 2. So you had a very serious 1-2 tandem with this team. This year you have Al Jefferson coming in, and then some piecemeal stuff where it's everyone from Raja Bell to Earl Watson, Francisco Elson. Everyone has contributed. Everyone's played a huge part in Utah's success. However, when you put all those pieces together, none of which is an all-star caliber player, then you factor in that some of these guys are a little older. Some of these guys, particularly Al Jefferson, are coming from systems that don't really mesh with the Jazz's system. Just a lot of change. And, Deron Williams talked during training camp how it was going to be an up-and-down season. It's easy to lose sight of that, especially when the Jazz just 2 or 3 weeks ago had one of the best records in the Western Conference. They had pulled off all these amazing comeback victories. But big picture, I think Jerry Sloan, Deron Williams, a lot of the players in this team will tell you that they're very much a work in progress. When they don't play well, when they don't execute, when they don't run Jerry Sloan's system to a T, they're not going to win games.
And one personnel move that Sloan made that just recently against the 76ers entailed starting rookie Gordon Hayward in place of Andre Kirilenko. You mentioned that Kirilenko closed out the game and that Coach Sloan didn't really think that change was a big deal. Didn't even know if he was going to keep with that combination one way or the other. But how did that change affect the team's dynamics, specifically at least in that game?
Yeah, it was very, very minimal. Sloan has a tendency in the past to start rookies, get them out there, get some minutes, and then go to his main rotation. It's not determined yet how Sloan's going to handle this because the Jazz are going to practice tomorrow, then fly to LA for the Lakers game. And Jerry said after the loss to Philadelphia, their 4th straight loss, 3 of which were against subpar teams, that he is not sure if he's going to continue to start Hayward, and he really doesn't think it's a big deal. Sloan all season has kind of played down the, who's starting, who's coming off the bench. He's more concerned with who's finishing, which is understandable. However, he made the change for a reason. The Jazz were struggling. They've had a problem with slow starts all season. And he is clearly, and his assistant coaches are looking for a spark to kind of get that first unit to play a little faster, to be a little more assertive, more aggressive, because they'll do it during the second quarter, they'll do it during the fourth quarter. They close games better than just about any team in the NBA, but they don't start well, which has been, since the season started, digging them into very huge holes, forcing them to come back, but you can only do that for so long, and it's going to wear out your main players, a la Darren Williams, Al Jefferson, Paul Millsap.
We're talking with the Salt Lake Tribune's Brian T. Smith. You can follow him on Twitter at TribJazz. And Brian, the Lakers have had plenty of success against Utah in recent history. Obviously, they eliminated the Jazz in the past 3 postseasons, and then specifically at Staples Center, 16 consecutive wins there. I mean, obviously each season the teams, has different identities and personnel, but has there been a common denominator in terms of, when Utah faces the Lakers at Staples Center?
I would say lately, if there's one, if it's two, it's Phil Jackson and it's Kobe Bryant. You put those two people together, and as long as they've been with that Lakers team, it's been one of, if not the best teams in the NBA. Then the Staples Center is a tough place to play. The Jazz recently beat the Lakers in LA. I remember Al Jefferson described it almost like he won the NBA Finals. He didn't think he had beaten the Lakers basically in his entire career. But in LA, it's a totally different story. It's going to be a very, very interesting matchup Tuesday night, because this is a struggling Jazz team. I don't remember, just from my own perspective, the last time the Jazz lost 5 straight. I think it will have at least been probably about 3 years. And I'll have to look in the books, which I'll end up doing, tomorrow when I'm starting to research the Lakers game. The point being, the Jazz are not playing well right now. The Lakers are kind of, still finding their way this season, but considering that it's on the road, the Jazz are coming off 4 consecutive losses. There's a very good chance the Jazz team, loses 5 consecutive games, and then they have to face the Spurs. So this right now is by far the toughest stretch of the season for the Jazz, and they're probably playing the Lakers at exactly the worst time.
Right. Obviously, when you look back in November, Utah did beat the Lakers. It was at Utah, but are there any certain portions of that game in terms of their toughness and their bench efforts that they can, tactically use, the upcoming game here at Staples? How do they transfer that over?
Yeah, they should be able to. The Jazz, that was one of the best Jazz games all season in terms of their effort, in terms of their execution, their confidence, and that confidence is something that Sloan has said lately is just really missing from this team, and it's obvious. They do not look like a team that believes that it can beat the best in the NBA, and the Jazz have really struggled during the last month and a half, playing above 500 teams. That being said, they looked great against the Lakers earlier this season. It was one of the biggest wins of the year. I think if the Jazz, go inside, but also they're going to have to, hit perimeter shots, which they struggle to do consistently all season. But that second unit was huge in that game, and unfortunately for the Jazz, the second unit has struggled during the last couple of weeks because you've had Memo Decor come back. He's still not 100%, and Sloan has continued to tinker with rotations and tinker with different players. And now you just have to change with Hayward going to the starting lineup, AK going to the bench. And the bench, the last 4 games during this losing streak, has not been able to run. Their ability to push the tempo, to use defensive rebounds, to use steals, and turn those into fast breaks, does everything from, get the home crowd going to get the starters fired up. That hasn't been there as well, and that's also had a trickle-down effect to the Jazz's losing streak.
Obviously, we're pretty much at the halfway point in terms of the NBA season. You look at the Western Conference standing, San Antonio is leading by 5.5 games over the Lakers, and then you look down the list, Oklahoma City is in 3rd, Dallas is in 4th, New Orleans is in 5th, and then Utah is in 6th. Just from the Jazz's standpoint, how do you see the Western Conference shaping up, and from there, and who are the main teams that they're worried about?
I think right now the Jazz are specifically worried about Denver and Portland. As long as Denver has Carmelo Anthony, they'll likely end up having a playoff spot, whether it's the 8th seed or the 5th seed, will obviously determine these last 35, 40 games. But if Melo isn't moved before the trade deadline, and you're going to hear a billion different things about that, if he's not, Denver is still a highly competitive team with a strong roster, and Utah struggles against Denver. The Blazers, for the second straight season, have proved themselves to be just about the most resilient team in recent NBA history. and they're winning games, and Utah's not right now, and Utah is actually in danger of falling from first to about fourth in that division if this continues, and they're going to do that in about a 2-week span. One of the biggest keys going into the season that you heard from everybody, from Darren Williams to Kevin O'Connor, their general manager, was that they get a high seed. They get one of those 1 through 4 seeds, thus they get home court advantage. And then maybe luck out, and the Lakers play somebody else, the Lakers get knocked off, or something beneficial happens, and the Jazz would have a shot in the playoffs because this is somewhat of a rebuilding year, and they're trying to put these new pieces together. The Jazz are in trouble right now if they can't turn this around, because if they get a 5th through 8th spot, they're going to be in the same situation they have been in the last 3 years when the Lakers have knocked them out of the playoffs at some point. Oklahoma City's strong, San Antonio's strong, Dallas, even with its injuries, is strong, and they seem like they'll pick somebody up before the deadline. And then obviously you have the Lakers, who, in my opinion, other than maybe Boston right now, big picture, long term, is still one of the top 2 teams in the NBA. So the Jazz are in a tough position right now, and it does not look like they're going to make a big move before the trade deadline. So it's going to come up to this team and this roster and Coach Sloan to figure this out.
Those are the thoughts of the Salt Lake Tribune's Brian T. Smith. Brian, thanks a lot for all your insight and your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.